Hey, welcome to Eye on the Bay. Tonight, we have got a little trip planned for you. We're gonna head for the hills. We're going to scale some mountain peaks. Whoa! Whoa, careful. Hike from the hilltops to the deep blue sea under the light of the silvery moon. Climb a mountain where you can see more of the United States than anywhere else in the United States. And the fact is, you don't have to go to the mountains to do this because the mountains are already here.
The top of Mount Diablo is 3,948 feet. The top of Mount Hamilton is a little over 4,200 feet, and Mount Tam is close to 2,600 feet. So these, by any standards, are not hills. And if you move these pieces of the topography to the central U.S.,
take off your hat and look at me.
They'd seem like Mount Everest.
On a recent trip with my dad to his hometown,
I'll be darned, they got a two-stop light.
I was stunned to learn that the topography in Kansas was not flat as a pancake. Oh, look, there's a hill. I can see it right there. Look off into the distance on the horizon.
Yeah?
Isn't that a hill?
Here, that's a mountain. That's not a hill.
This leads to a critical question. What is a mountain?
That's a really good question. And I actually went to the dictionary to look it up. The dictionary says a mountain is a large mass of earth and rock that sits above the general common surroundings, and it often does so abruptly. And some dictionaries say it's larger than a hill. So a mountain it's up to you. If you want to call something a mountain or a hill or a ridge, you know, you've got some flexibility.
So for the next 2 nights on Eye on the Bay, we'll show you what lies at the top of Bay Area mountains, what you can do there, what you can see.
If you look out that way, from the right vantage point, you can see Half Dome in Yosemite Park.
On our tour of Bay Area peak experiences, I'm Brian Hackney, and we're going to begin with what was once described as the most important peak in the American West. It certainly has the best view.
You can see a long way from Mount Diablo.
From its summit, you can see 1,600 miles of tidal harbor spilling out from the Great Valley.
And on a clear day, the views are just phenomenal. You won't see anything like it anywhere else.
In fact, you can see more land and water from atop Mount Diablo than any other peak in the lower U.S. So you would think the earliest settlers would at least have gotten its name right. It was the year 1805, and somewhere near here, Buchanan Field in Concord, Spanish soldiers were pursuing Indians, trying to capture them, and they were doing it in the shadow of that mountain. The Spanish follow the Indians into a nearby willow thicket until suddenly a wildly dressed medicine man jumps out. I'm not really him. And it terrifies the Spanish all the way back to the Presidio in San Francisco. When they file their report, they name the location of the encounter Monte del Diablo, which means Thicket of the Devil. But when white settlers see that name years later, they think Monte del Diablo means Mount Diablo. And so a mistaken name was born.
Well, let's just go to the top.
Mount Diablo is the centerpiece of the Diablo Range, which begins by lifting out of the Carquinez Strait in the hills behind me, north of Concord, and it ends 375 miles south in the Antelope Valley here in Southern California.
It's a trip back through time. You can see geology in action.
That's USGS geologist David Schwartz.
Climbing up the mountain, we're actually going back in time. And by the time we get to the top, we will have gone back in time some 200 million years.
And how high is Diablo?
Diablo is 3,948 feet.
That's actually about a foot higher than it was when John Muir first saw the peak in 1868.
It's probably the most actively growing mountain in the Bay Area.
That's because Mount Diablo is trapped between two earthquake faults.
And what we've got is the concrete fault out there. And on the other side of Mount Diablo, we have the Greenville Fault. And if you're following along the Greenville Fault, you have to step to your left to get to the concrete fault. And in doing so, you create a zone of compression. Basically, the crust is being squeezed. And you can sort of think of the crust as being maybe a slimy or wet watermelon seed. And you squeeze it between your fingers, and it moves up. And in moving up, it's raising the topography, and it's fundamentally formed Mount Diablo.
And even though we're almost 4,000 feet high, at the peak, we're standing on what used to be at the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah, at the bottom of the ocean, and actually fairly deep, 6 million years ago. And when you look out at the ridge in front of us, you can see sort of a vertical rib of dark rock. These are beds of sandstone and shale that were deposited flat on the bottom of an ocean. And over time, as Diablo was coming up and being squeezed, compressed, lithified, it turned into rock, and as part of the mountain building process, they rotated from flat to sitting on end, and this is part of the process of building up the mountain. Well, can you feel the difference in time? We've just crossed over from the Cretaceous and fell deeper into time back to the Jurassic.
Wait a minute. The Jurassic? Does that mean dinosaurs once roamed Mount Diablo?
Well, at the time that these rocks were deposited, dinosaurs did roam the planet. But this location was below sea level. And it really isn't until roughly 2 million years ago that this area permanently came up and was exposed. So dinosaurs by that time were extinct. And so the answer is no.
What's the incentive for coming to Mount Diablo?
I think there are a lot of reasons to come to Mount Diablo, and you get incredible views, a tremendous panorama of the Bay Area, and you get a much better feeling in 3 dimensions for what this area looks like: the hills, the mountains, the valleys, the growing population centers, the bay. It just makes it very, very real. This is a very, very distinctive part of the Bay Area. It's very unique.
And the mountain wouldn't exist without faults. All right, so it's earthquakes that build mountains. But which earthquake do you remember lately? Maybe this one? In a moment, the shocking facts behind the Loma Prieta epicenter, as Eye on the Bay's tour of Bay Area peak experiences continues. Welcome back to Eye on the Bay. I'm Brian Hackney as we continue our tour of peak experiences in the Bay Area, taking a look at the mountaintops of the Bay. And we finally arrive here at Loma Prieta. And where were you on October 17th, 1989? On that day at 5:04 p.m., the Giants were getting ready to play the A's in the World Series at Candlestick. And the crust of the earth under the Santa Cruz Mountains snapped with the force of 10 atom bombs.
At second base, so the Oakland A's take.
Hey, what? We're having an earthquake.
Oh my God, we're having an earthquake. Wait a minute. Hold on. Can you feel that?
11 miles of crust ruptured 10 miles down.
In fact, what really happened here was literally this ridge just exploded apart.
Serious damage on the Bay Bridge.
That is completely collapsed. That's the upper section collapsing into the lower section.
We have one woman is unconscious, bleeding from the head. She is breathing. She's got a pulse.
3,700 were injured.
We need something to pry the door.
62 were killed.
There's quite a few it's just no help.
I just had no comprehension that Mother Nature could be that destructive and just, you know.
All it did was raise a ridge near one Bay Area peak 2 feet. The peak was Loma Prieta.
When we name earthquakes, we name them for generally the most prominent physical or cultural feature near where the earthquake occurs, and Loma Prieta is the tallest mountain around here.
In this journey, we'll head to the infamous peak. Have a nice trip to the epicenter.
Whoa!
Whoa, careful. And explode a few myths about the '89 quake. Myth 1, that Loma Prieta was the epicenter. We're standing on Loma Prieta, which is what the earthquake's named for, but how far is the actual epicenter?
The epicenter is off here to the southwest, probably about 4 or 5 miles. It actually centers around the Summit Ridge area.
That's our expert, USGS geologist Dan Ponte today.
Ken, did you have anything?
And Dan Ponte back in 1989.
Everything's been pretty well recon, and nobody's seen anything obvious.
He was part of a team of geologists measuring the mountain in the days after the quake.
This looks more like the left lateral.
Yeah.
So Dan can dispel myth 2, that the peak was pushed higher by the earthquake. So Loma Prieta, the actual peak, was lowered during the earthquake.
A little bit, yeah. This side of the mountains actually went down very slightly.
And do you think we can get kind of close to the epicenter?
We can get close. We can get as close as you want. Depends on how far you want to walk.
We're heading 50 miles south of San Francisco to the Santa Cruz Mountains, the Loma Prieta epicenter. 37 degrees north, 121.88 degrees west. That's our goal, to actually stand on the spot that wrought all the havoc. Here we go. So Summit Road had a lot of damage.
Yeah.
On this epic trip, we'll visit Loma Prieta's greatest hit.
The largest fracture that occurred up here in the earthquake actually occurred right by where that house was. We passed where those
You mean that famous crack?
The big famous crack, yeah.
Oh my God, I kind of recognize this house.
Recognize the house,
yeah.
But this is it, that's the house. And here's the fracture that came through in '89.
Wow.
This was the largest of the individual ruptures.
We got about 2 feet here.
Well, this was the crack that was famous for people jumping into it and saying, hurry up, James, take my picture.
Right, right.
Get back down in 2 minutes.
One picture. Hurry, James.
It's amazing that house survived.
There was no displacement under the house. I don't know who the owners are now, but there was a gentleman that owned the property, was the name of Tranbarger. And he had some pretty interesting stories of that afternoon.
Now here we were standing just about like we are right now, and he was thrown to his right.
And I was going to go out the front door. Then my wife had me change my mind.
And now we're at Morrell Road, which is right at this intersection.
This amazing site produced a repeat performance of 1906 right here.
Ground ruptures occurring up on Summit Ridge exactly at this place in 1906.
Morrell Road, and that black line is the rip in the road in 1989. A picture that was taken of Morrell Road 83 years ago shows a rupture in precisely the same place after the 1906 quake. And since 1906 was triggered by the infamous San Andreas fault, so was the '89 quake. Or was it? Myth number 3. Loma Prieta was centered on the San Andreas.
The 1989 earthquake did not occur specifically on the same strand of the San Andreas fault that ruptured in 1906. The fault didn't have a name. It was never identified because it never exposes itself at the surface.
So the most damaging bay quake of modern times came from out of nowhere. We'll finish the treacherous journey.
Whoa!
To the epicenter sprung by that no-name fault.
Whoa, whoa, you all right?
After we take a different kind of break. Welcome back as we continue our epic tour of Bay Area mountain peaks. I'm Brian Hackney, and while you may have survived the Loma Prieta earthquake, have you ever stood on its epicenter?
No, actually, I've gotten fairly close.
So this will be a first for you if we make it.
If we make it.
That's our goal, a hike to the epicenter of the biggest Bay Area quake in modern history.
If you're crazy enough to do it, I'll go with you.
Well, that's what the show's all about.
That's right. Yeah, let's keep going a little bit farther.
Our guide is USGS geologist Dan Ponte.
The epicenter is off here to the southwest, probably about 4 or 5 miles.
And while you can drive part of the way to it,
I'm sorry, turn left here.
The epicenter is buried in the wilderness of the Santa Cruz Mountains. So we use GPS.
Okay, now you want to go to the left here. It's that way about a half a mile.
Knocked on a few doors, nobody home. Determined we were very close according to the topo map. And the epicenter is right over there in that opposite ridge, but there's no way to get down here. There's especially no way to get down here with a camera. So back into the truck to find another way in.
We're essentially due north of the epicenter.
Only to discover the lovely state park system had already done the work for us. All right, we finally figured it out that at Nicene March State Park, there is a trail to the epicenter. We're going. This trip will take you deep into the wilderness, and that was a good thing for the Bay Area. I've heard Ross Stein say that you could not pick a better place to hide a magnitude 7 in the Bay Area.
If you asked me, where can I hide a magnitude 7 earthquake to do the least amount of damage in the Bay Area, I promise you I would have chosen the Santa Cruz Mountains.
And despite the fact it's out here in the middle of nowhere, look what happened 50 miles from the epicenter. That's right. About a mile into some picture-perfect wilderness, something appears to spoil the view. So this is the end of the road. How much farther is it? Let's see.
Yeah, you can come right here.
We've got a mile and a half to go before we even get to the trail to the epicenter.
Right.
Can't we just fake this? No! It's Eye of the Bay! We are going! The trail is beautiful, a little bit hazardous. Man, you better watch your step.
Whoa! Whoa, whoa, you all right?
But it turned out to be worth the trip.
This is Zapdos Creek.
Pretty little site. Where were you when it hit?
Actually, I was at Candlestick.
You were, so you were at the World Series.
I was at the World Series game, and when the earthquake hit, for the first time in my life, I really was nervous. I'm on an overhang on a concrete walkway. There's a concrete walkway above me.
Yeah.
Crowd of people, nowhere to go. At that point, the radio reports had started to come back in, and we were starting to hear about some of the other damage.
Serious damage on the Bay Bridge.
Based on where people were calling from and how they described the earthquake, I had an idea that it was in the South Bay somewhere.
And it's not far from where we are now.
No.
Heck, we're getting close. After about 2 miles and 45 minutes on the trail, oh my God, I see a sign. The epicenter. That is cool. What happened that defined this spot as the epicenter?
What the epicenter defines is the place on the ground right above the place where that rupture starts. So it began here. At 11 miles down, that rupture began and it propagated and it ripped up that surface coming up toward us. The fast-moving wave energy, the P wave energy, and the strong energy would have come to us very, very quickly. So it would have almost been kind of like a train hitting us. Would have been very sharp, jolting motions, both up and down, and then more violently, even sideways. Rocks falling down these slopes. It would have been a very frightening place to be, to stand right here.
The scars have healed now. There's not a trace of the huge rip from the Loma Prieta quake, where cars could break an axle driving over the fracture in 1989. Nobody now even suspects that they're driving over the ghost of that earthquake. The ridgetop will never be the same. Loma Prieta raised it about 2 feet in 7 seconds. And despite everything that happened, there's thousands more where that came from. How long has it taken the mountains to achieve these heights?
Well, you know, I think you're talking about thousands of earthquakes that produce these mountains.
That's how we know the farther we are from the last big quake.
Oh my God, we're having an earthquake. Wait a minute. Hold on, hold on.
the closer we are to the next one. I have some really bad news for you.
What's that?
We have to walk back now.
It's fine with me. It's downhill, almost.
Welcome back to Eye on the Bay. I'm Brian Hackney, and we've had so much fun on our tour of Bay Area peaks that we are totally out of time. Tomorrow night, we're going to hike Mount Tam in the moonlight, and we're also going to take a tour to my favorite peak in the Bay Area. That's tomorrow. Want more info? Log on to our website, cbs5.com/Eye on the Bay. All for now. Brian Hackney, thanks for watching.